Your Highness, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to Race Day at Abu Dhabi Finance Week. There's been a palpable energy in Abu Dhabi during our biggest finance week so far. Importantly, COP28 commencing today means that Race Day is more important than ever. We're also very proud to be a principal climate finance partner with COP28. It's another indicator of the UAE's strong support for the sustainability agenda, as evidenced by, amongst other things, being the first country in the region to announce a net zero emissions target, establishing the largest single-site solar power project in the world, and many more initiatives. Perhaps even more importantly, this is a country with incredible energy and ambition, which is embracing decarbonisation as a way to diversify and develop the Falcon economy. As I'm sure you know, the challenges facing COP28 are daunting. As articulated by His Excellency Sultan Al Jaber, we don't need to wait for the global stocktake to plan our response to the global stocktake. We must lay the groundwork now. One of the areas we're behind in is finance. McKinsey estimates that the climate finance gap is around $4 trillion per annum. It's a daunting figure. The lack of available, accessible, affordable climate finance is leading the world to fall well behind in the race to net zero, as a swift and permanent gear change is required. What's ADGM's role? Well, the gap is too great to be met by the public sector alone. The private sector must play a significant role. This is where ADGM is pivotal. ADGM is here to create an attractive environment to do business, enabled by world-class regulatory frameworks and enforcement of it. We're here to host companies and financial products and services that will channel capital towards economic activities that will make net zero a reality. This is where we've developed our sustainable finance regulatory framework. Our regulations cover rules for sustainability-orientated products and services, such as funds and bonds, regulation of carbon markets, and ESG disclosures. Each of these components is significant. In combination, however, we have the basis for the gear shift required to drive forward our development as a green finance centre. I would like to take a moment to address some components of our comprehensive framework. Firstly, green funds. Reducing the financing gap requires investors to trust in the environmental credentials of investment products. In other words, to prevent greenwashing. Finance is, after all, about trust. That is why our regulatory framework for green investments imposes robust standards on funds which intend to invest in environmentally sustainable assets, such as the requirement for alignment with recognisable green taxonomies. I'm delighted by the news that Mazda Green REIT has become the first fund to obtain a designation as an ADGM Green Fund. It's a prime example of the type of investment strategy required to ensure green assets obtain requisite financing. We look forward to many more green funds establishing here. Next, I'd like to talk about climate transition funds. Of course, capital needs to be directed to projects like sustainable real estate and renewable power. However, 95% of investable assets are not green. Net zero will not be reached by only investing capital into assets that are already environmentally sustainable. It requires channeling capital and assets that are not green in order that they become so. That's why we have a framework for climate transition funds. These are funds that invest in what we call greening assets. companies and other assets where there are safeguards to ensure the capital is genuinely going to help their pathway to net zero. We believe our framework, which is the first of its kind, is pivotal in unlocking investments in the transition. I'd like to now move on to regulating carbon markets. Net zero must be achieved primarily by emissions reductions. However, creating a credible, liquid and trusted market for emissions and their pricing is nevertheless an important part of the equation. Our regulations on environmental instruments as financial instruments achieves that end and has enabled us to host Air Carbon Exchange, the first regulated voluntary carbon market and clearinghouse. It also means ADGM is ready to act as required to support the UAE's further initiatives in developing, for instance, emissions markets. ADGM's status as a sustainable finance centre will rest not only on finance flowing through this jurisdiction, but the companies based here must be more sustainable themselves. That is why we issued rules for ESG disclosures by all ADGM companies above a size threshold. Our ESG disclosure framework is the most comprehensive in the region in terms of scope of companies covered, from public to private financial services and commercial companies. Our approach marks us out both regionally and globally. In the word race, we have the letter C. RACE stands for collaboration. Recognising this, the FSRA coordinates the Sustainable Finance Working Group, a group of UAE financial services regulators, ministries, stock exchanges and other bodies. This year, the group has progressed its agenda to ensure the UAE as a whole develops its ESG disclosure requirements, governance requirements, and importantly, the development of a UAE green taxonomy. We've also increased the number of signatories of the Abu Dhabi Sustainable Finance Declaration to a total of 116 organisations who are committed to the development of sustainable finance in Abu Dhabi, the UAE and the wider region. In concluding, in the race to net zero, global efforts have often seemed to be stuck in first gear. Now the momentum is here. In the capital of capital, within this country of determined energy, with both the desire and the substance to realise ambitious goals. ADGM stands primed to become the location of choice for the investment vehicles, products and services that will make net zero a reality. Thank you for your time. I very much look forward to hearing from our distinguished speakers today, to the conversations with you, our guests, and to a successful COP28. Thank you very much.